Hi, this is Phil at Simply Rhino. V-Ray is one of the world's most popular renderers and has been available as a plugin for Rhino for over 10 years. In that time, V-Ray has come a long way and is now much more complete and feature-rich, whilst at the same time being easier to use. With this in mind, I thought it would be a good idea to look at some of the features that have made a debut in the latest version for Rhino, V-Ray 5. I'm going to start by looking at previewing our scene with the new Vision Preview engine, before moving on to a feature called Light Gen, where we can create a number of pre-built lighting solutions. Next, I'll look at Cosmos, the new content browser for V-Ray, and then Chaos Cloud, where we can send our renders directly to the remote Chaos render farm rather than rendering them on our local machine. I'll move on to look at Light Mix, which is a great new feature that allows for lights to be adjusted after the render has been completed, and I'll finish up by taking a quick look at Vantage, which is a relatively new real-time Raytracer with live linking to Rhino. I've also created a short, separate tutorial video to show V-Ray decals, another new feature in V-Ray 5 for Rhino, and you'll see the link to this video in the description below. Let's start our quick tour of V-Ray by looking at scene previews. Now, as you probably know, V-Ray has an interactive mode that can be used either in the Rhino viewport or in a separate window. This is a fully ray trace mode and can be powered via CPU or GPU with specific acceleration for NVIDIA cards. Here I'm using NVIDIA RTX acceleration and also the NVIDIA denoiser to help clean up the image more quickly. This is a fully interactive live mode, so I can move the camera and edit the geometry. But of course, every time I do this, the ray trace calculations start from scratch. And you'll see similar behavior in other rendering software. Now, I'm using a maximized viewport here, but I could speed things up by using either a smaller Rhino viewport or the V-Ray frame buffer window. When I set this up, the V-Ray asset editor lets me choose CPU or GPU modes, denoiser type, etc. And here you can see that this now appears much faster. However, if you have a large scene with complex materials and you want to preview or set up on a larger scale, then this interactive mode may prove to be slightly slow or cumbersome. I could switch to the Rhino rendered viewport, but then this doesn't work well with V-Ray lights, and even if I turn the lights off, the representation of geometry with V-Ray materials applied is really not good enough. So, in V-Ray 5, we have a new preview mode called V-Ray Vision. This works in a separate window and is launched via this button. Vision uses a lightweight gaming engine, so it's not a ray-traced view, but it gives a good general approximation of lighting and materials, and as such is ideal for setting up a large scene. It takes a little while to load your model into Vision, but once this is done, we have our real-time interactive view. I've put Rhino and the Vision window side by side here so that you can see how responsive this is. Vision is automatically linked to Rhino, although I can turn off this linking. You can see that Vision does a good job of approximating reflections on the bodywork and mirrors, but also that the glass here has lost its colour, and if we move to the rear of the vehicle, then the taillights are not properly represented because there's no ray tracing to calculate the translucency and reflections necessary. In Rhino terms, Vision is very similar to the Rhino rendered viewport when compared to the Rhino ray traced viewport. As I make changes, either to the view, geometry or materials, you'll see that these changes are reflected in Vision immediately. So all in all, Vision offers a quick and simple way of previewing a V-Ray scene. But there's a lot more to Vision than simple previewing. So to show this, I'm going to maximize the viewport so you can see the vision controls. Firstly, I can manipulate the view with keyboard shortcuts and mouse gestures directly in Vision. In the Live Link settings, I can turn on or off the linking to the Rhino camera and V-Ray Sun. In the Info panel, I'll see information on the various shortcuts and mouse gestures. And next, I can change resolution, camera navigation mode, and also turn on or off auto exposure. Then I can go a little deeper into the settings and set, for example, shadow quality. And then I have some detailed color corrections where I can fine-tune exposure, contrast, saturation, temperature, and tint. I can save out these color corrections or load them in from a file. And of course, I can save out images from Vision. Finally, I can write out the scene as a standalone application, so I can send this Vision scene to a user that doesn't have V-Ray or Rhino. Here, I can create and save the exe file, and if I close everything down and then run this file, you'll see the self-contained Vision scene that I can manipulate with Vision's navigation controls. Let's now look at another new feature in V-Ray 5, and that's Light Gen or Light Generator. Here I have a fairly basic lighting setup using a V-Ray dome light with the default Studio EXR image applied. I also have a white background and a simple circular floor. If I want to quickly explore some more interesting lighting alternatives, then this is where V-Ray Light Gen comes in. I'll just reposition the vehicle and then click on the Light Gen icon. This will open the Light Gen window with both exterior and interior solutions. For exterior, I can choose Sun and Sky or HDR solutions, whereas for interior, Light Gen is limited to Sun and Sky. I'm interested in an exterior solution here, and if I choose Sun and Sky, I can choose a number of altitude variations, that's the sun's height, and also the rotational variations. And I can also set the size of the previews. With the HDR variant, I can choose the number of unique styles, the positional variations, and the seed, which is the randomness of these. So, I'll switch to the shaded mode and choose 5 unique HDR styles with 3 variations of each to create 15 separate lighting solutions. I'll increase the preview size to 240 pixels and then click to generate the 15 solutions. This will take a little time to calculate, so I'll skip to the end of this process. Once completed, you can see that the 15 solutions are previewed in the Light Gen window. I'll switch to a 4-view mode in Rhino and turn on the V-Ray interactive viewport. Then I can choose one of the pre-built solutions and double-click on its preview to load that solution into Rhino. If I maximize the Rhino viewport, you can see that we have a high-quality HDR solution for the lighting and environment, with correct exposure compensation. Once these variations have been created, they can be saved out to a .lightset file that we can then load back into Light Gen later. And of course, we can choose any of the V-Ray render modes to render out these solutions. I've now returned to the previous lighting setup in order to show another great new feature in V-Ray 5, and that's Chaos Cosmos. Cosmos is a browser containing high-quality assets, including furniture, lighting, vegetation, vehicles, people, material, and HDRIs. These can be viewed and accessed via several different routes, and the Cosmos browser is essentially a portal to a collection of online assets, all of which are free to use with your V-Ray license. Let's have a look at how easy it is to add a figure to our existing Rhino scene. I'm going to switch to 4-view, and in the top viewport I'll add a point object to act as a target to which I can snap the base of the figure. Next, I'll select People from the Cosmos browser and scroll down to view the various figures. I think I'll choose Elliot. I can now download and import the Cosmos asset directly into my Rhino scene. I can see the figure in the V-Ray interactive viewport now, and if I isolate the point snap in Rhino, I'll just rotate him so that he's facing the camera. If I go to the Asset Editor and choose Geometries, I'll see the Cosmos asset in the list. This is a self-contained object with a discrete material assignment that cannot be edited. In the Properties in the right panel, I can choose to turn Material Override on or off, and also I can choose to increase the mesh quality of the asset to high. But of course, this will involve more polygons being displayed in the Rhino viewport and can affect display performance. Finally, I can use Merge to convert the Cosmos asset to a standard V-Ray proxy object with a separate material definition. I'll add a vehicle now using the same process, and, of course, larger assets will take a little longer to download. But once again, when completed, these assets are displayed in the Rhino viewport in an economical way. From the Cosmos browser, I can see the assets that have been downloaded. These are stored locally and by default in your Documents folder, so that they are easy to reuse. The Cosmos assets, of course, work with V-Ray Vision, and if I've chosen the High Quality Mesh option, then I can turn on this option inside of Vision. Having populated the scene with some content from the Chaos Cosmos browser, I'll now render this out using Chaos Cloud, which is tightly integrated with V-Ray 5. As the name suggests, Chaos Cloud allows for the creation of offline renders using the remote Chaos Render Farm servers rather than using a local machine. Over the last couple of years, many of us have got used to working remotely from our offices, and, for example, we may be using V-Ray and Rhino on a machine that doesn't have the computing power to create large rendered output. So, in situations like this, Chaos Cloud can be a great solution. I'll start by setting up the render in the same way as if I was outputting on my local machine. I'll open the V-Ray Asset Editor and turn off Interactive Render and Progressive Render, meaning that I'll be using the production or bucket rendering method. I'll check CPU mode, set the quality to Medium Plus, and then set the denoiser type to V-Ray. In render output, I already have matched viewport set, and I'll increase the width of the image to 2500 pixels, and the height will automatically be constrained to match the viewport ratio. Next, rather than hitting the render button here, I can select this icon to send the render to the cloud. This will analyze the scene and then open Chaos Cloud in a web browser window. In the Submit Job screen, I can name the image and check the resolution and render mode before hitting the Submit button. This will upload my V-Ray scene to the Chaos server, and when this is complete, I can either track the progress of the render by selecting View Job, or in this case, I can go back to Rhino and keep modelling. Once the job is complete, I'll receive an email from Chaos containing a link to the job. Again, I can log into my account and view and download the completed image as a zip archive. Whilst this is downloading, I'll explain how this works in terms of cost. Chaos Cloud uses a credit-based system, and these can be purchased in bundles of 100 credits upwards. 20 free credits are included with a V-Ray for Rhino license, so you can try out Chaos Cloud with your Rhino models and get a feel for the number of credits used for a typical render. Once downloaded, you'll see that the zip archive contains a composite EXR file and separate JPEG images of the RGB, alpha and denoiser passes and the composite effects result pass. If I open the EXR file in Photoshop, I'll see the expected high-quality image. One thing to remember is that the EXR file is a 32-bit image, and as such, there may be some Photoshop filters and effects that won't work at this bit depth. If I convert to 16-bit at the default settings, then my image will wash out, but I can get very close to the original by converting using the exposure and gamma preset. And here's the final image after a little bit more tweaking in Photoshop. Another interesting new feature in V-Ray 5 is light mix, which we can use in this scene, but in order to demonstrate this better, I'm going to start with this simple scene which is lit by 3 V-Ray rectangular lights. I've named these lights 1, 2 and 3 respectively, and in the environment rollout you can see that there is a black background and no environmental lighting. So the only light source is from those 3 rectangular lights. I've made the rectangular lights invisible, and the main source of illumination is from light 03, which is set to a brightness of 40 and fills the front of the scene. And if I turn this off and on, you'll see the effect this has. V-Ray Light Mix allows me to edit the brightness and colours of these lights in the frame buffer after rendering has been completed, and this makes it easier to either create lighting alternatives or to tweak the lighting after the render has completed. To enable Light Mix, then when I set up the render, I need to go to Render Elements and add the Light Mix element. I can choose how to add these lights, and here I'll set individual lights. I'll now go ahead and render out the scene. Once the render has completed, I can see Light Mix in the V-Ray layers and open this up. I can see the 3 individual rectangular lights and turn these on or off. I can change the brightness of these lights individually and also their coloration. So there's lots of scope to fine-tune or create alternatives after the render has been completed. This feature will work with image-based lighting too, although to be fair, this might not be the best use of Light Mix. But if I open up a render of my RV scene, then you can see that I can access the lighting component here, turn this on or off, and change the brightness and coloration after the render has been completed. I started this video by looking at previewing in V-Ray, and we have one final alternative method, which is a separate program called Chaos Vantage. Vantage is a standalone real-time Raytracer, and V-Ray 5 for Rhino has the ability to live link to Vantage, meaning that it can be thought of almost as another Rhino viewport. I can launch Vantage from Rhino by using this button. At the time of making this video, you can get a free 1-year Vantage license before June the 15th, 2022. Vantage has specific hardware requirements, and these include an NVIDIA RTX GPU, Windows 10 and a decent amount of system RAM. We recently tested 3 PNY NVIDIA GPUs with RTX acceleration, and you can find a link to these tests below. When this scene first opens in Vantage, it looks a little flat. But I have a lot of control of the image, and if I go into the Render tab here, and then open up the Advanced section, I can turn off the clamping of the secondary rays, and this immediately livens up the reflectivity of the vehicle and glass surfaces. The secondary rays are clamped by default to prevent fireflies, but given that we have a fairly simple lighting solution, we shouldn't have too much of a problem with those here. I can also increase the number of bounces for global illumination, reflections and refractions, which should improve things further. But be aware that making these changes can slow down the frame rate in Vantage. If I open the Camera tab, I can change the ratio and output size, and I'll set this to match the Rhino maximised viewport. Then I'll open the Post tab, and here I'm just going to reduce the amount of bloom slightly. This may help to compensate for some of the overbright areas created by unclamping the secondary rays. I can double-click on any of the tabs on the 2 panels to minimise the panels and achieve a full screen view. I've done this so we can compare the Vantage render with the Chaos Cloud render from earlier. And as you can see, they're looking quite similar now. I've now put Rhino side by side with Vantage to give you an idea of how quickly the ray traced view updates. As I move around in the Rhino viewport, you'll see that Vantage updates immediately, and when I stop moving, there is just a very small lag as the Vantage denoiser kicks in and cleans up the image. If I pull around to the rear of the vehicle, you'll see now that the reflectivity between the 2 vehicles is calculated correctly, and we can see the translucency and colour of the glass in the taillights with the reflector underneath them. I can create and save camera views in Vantage and move between them by double-clicking. When I do this, you'll see the slight lag as the denoiser updates. Once I've created these views, I can animate between them. To do this, I'll open up the animation editor and I'll drag the first camera into the camera animation in the timeline below. And then I'll do the same with the second camera. This creates a transition, and clicking on this will allow me to set the type and length of this transition. I can then preview the animation directly in the Vantage viewport. I've made a few changes and reduced the duration of the animation to 5 seconds. To output this as a high quality render, I'll hit the render button here. I'll have a choice of still image or image sequence, and I'll choose image sequence. Next, I'll set the output resolution as previous, turn the denoiser on, and start rendering out the image sequence. Once this is completed, I'll have a sequence of images that I can load into a video editor, and you can see the final result here. So that's about the end of what I wanted to cover in this video. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to leave any comments below. If you found this video useful, then please hit the like button, and remember that to keep up with all the latest developments in Rhino and V-Ray for Rhino, then you can subscribe to this channel. At Simply Rhino, we offer training for Rhino and all its key plugins, including V-Ray. So check out our website for more details. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch up with you in the next video.